depending on which part of the world you're in. It's my pleasure to introduce Professor Daniela Pigosso. She's going to be talking about towards the prevention of rebound effects by design. To me, it's a very important topic in terms of how we manage sustainability. Daniela Pigosso is professor on design for absolute sustainability at the Technical University of Denmark and a member of DTU Center for Absolute Sustainability. Her research and innovation activities are demonstrated in 20 plus national and international projects carried out in close collaboration with industry, governmental and non-governmental organizations. Currently, she serves as a member of the advisory board of the Design Society, which is how we know each other, in addition to several impact publications and contributions. Daniela has had an impressive industrial and societal impact throughout her career. I have listened to her before. I'm sure you will enjoy the talk. Daniela, I can share the screen and go ahead and start the
I'll
lecture.
do that, yeah. So thank you very much for the invitation. It's really nice to be here today to talk a little bit about our research on design for absolute sustainability. And I think there's really an important topic to talk in the context of design. Because if you look at design from a very broad context, one could argue that design is what enables humanity to survive in the very hostile environment of Earth. Since the very ages, as human beings, we've been designing tools and ways of living that has made this place our home. But I'm sure that if I would ask each and every one of you in the audience today, what is design as a verb or as a noun, there would be probably as many definitions as there are people today here. But I decided to choose one definition that I find very encompassing and that helps us to understand the power of design as well. And this is the definition from Herb Simon back in 68, where he defines design as courses of action that are aimed at changing existing situations into preferred ones. So it's all about understanding how we can change the world around us in a way that can support a better way of living and a better life for humanity as a whole. And I would say that since the very early designs that human beings made up until today, we've really done a lot of progress. It always started with understanding of the actual designed artifact, those tools like in the Stone Age that allows us to deal with the nature and the environment around us to be able to fulfill. And then over time, we realized that we actually could be more effective in the way in which we were creating those designed artifacts. And that's where the focus on the design process start to become more apparent. We realized that if we had a well-defined step-by-step approach that would guide us from understanding what the needs are to developing alternative concepts, evaluating those concepts up until coming to the design artifact, would probably have a higher success and a higher efficiency in the way we design those artifacts. Then over time, we also realized that actually we needed to have a stronger focus not only on the design process itself, but on, first of all, understanding what is the specific problem that we want to address. And at that moment, a very strong focus on user-oriented design, for instance, started as well. And I would say that with all of those developments in a research community, we've been really expanding and going beyond what one once was imagined as possible. Today, if you go to any design-oriented conference, you are going to see a number of different topics connected to the design process itself. For instance, innovative design theories, methods, or tools, how to deal with human behavior and creativity when looking at the designers, how digitalization and the huge change AI is bringing to society is also influencing design and the way we design, industrial design, and then going beyond the product itself towards systems engineering and systems design and so forth. We've also become more and more integrated into understanding those interfaces between the actual products, the technology, and the people around it. And I would say we've also advanced quite a lot in relation to application areas or specialities of design, if you want to call it in that way. We've been working a lot on, for instance, what does design for healthcare means, or design for specific manufacturing processes such as additive manufacturing, design for excellence, design for sustainability. And the lists here, they are extremely extensive. Um, and I would say, if you take all of that into consideration, I'm convinced that we've really come a long way in designing and designing the world around us. My focus has been since the beginning of my career on this one specific topic on design for sustainability, and that's the one I want to dig down a little bit further today to question whether all this way that we've come so far, whether it is really enough or not. And I want to do that by giving three main examples that provides the argumentation for yes, we've done a lot and we are aiming or not aiming, but we are actually able now to fulfill our needs at the same time as we are respecting the planetary boundaries and the nature limitations connected to that. The first example here is connected to efficient technologies. Lighting has changed the way we live in very significant ways. In the very beginning, the amount of energy that was required for a lumen was extremely high, and our technologies weren't really that effective or efficient. Today, the story is very different with technology such as the LED lights. We are about 90% more efficient than with the incandescent bulbs. They last about 25 times longer, and they are providing access to lumens and light to the large majority of the population in the world today. If we move forward and we go more at a system level, we could also discuss this case that I've been working with Carlsberg here in Denmark, the beer manufacturer. They've been looking into how to minimize the overall impact with single-use packaging, with beer cans or bottles, by coming up with a new circular product, in this case a bio-based and biodegradable beer bottle that would still be recycled in the recycling systems using the infrastructure of the different countries. But if for some reason these bottles end up in nature, they would be able to biodegrade without bringing any additional impacts to the environment around it. That requires not only an innovation in the product design itself, but also an innovation in the manufacturing processes to enable that to happen. Up until that moment, it wasn't really possible to have a 3D bottle like this one made out of paper pulp that at the same time would be able to hold the pressure that is required for beer bottles, for instance. But it was also an innovation in terms of the supply chain, changing a lot who are the suppliers of the materials required to manufacture the bottles, but also how the filling process would take place in connection with the beer production facilities and factories as well. And as with Carlsberg, we see more and more companies going into circular economy, so trying to understand how to minimize the impact of products across their entire life cycle. And then if we go to the final example, we also see sustainable design being implemented in more higher level systemic changes. In this case, connected to food waste, for instance, we know that food waste is one of the biggest problems that we face today. About one third of all the food in the world goes to waste, which I think is unacceptable. But companies like Too Good To Go are trying to revert this trend by allowing supermarkets, restaurants, bakeries to sell the surplus food to people at a lower price so that we would minimize significantly the overall food waste at the same time as fulfilling social needs in having access to nutrition with lower prices as well. And this is an innovation on the system around it, on the services, on the stakeholders that are involved to make that happen, but also an innovation in consumer behavior and how we um, relate to products such as food that have a limited lifetime, but at the same time and extremely important to fulfill our needs. And if you just take a second to think about all of the other sustainability oriented innovations that you see in your life, you'd probably realize that there are hundreds, thousands of different examples that we could be talking, either at the technology level, at the product level, or at the system level. And all of those different innovations, they are enabled by the very strong backbone that we have developed over the years in design science. But I really wonder myself whether this is enough. And here I want to bring the very same examples back again to show you the other side of the story and how this, one could argue, very well designed sustainability interventions have actually affected the overall sustainability performance of the systems in which they are integrated. If we go back to the LED lighting example, for instance, I would still say that yes, they are extremely energy efficient. But what happens at the same time is that they are way cheaper and more convenient to use than the lamps they are substituting. And this has resulted in people simply having way more lighting bulbs than they would have otherwise, many times exceeding to a very large extent the amount of lumens that they actually need in a given environment. But more than that, because it's so cheap and because they are so energy efficient, people started to use them for longer. If you drive in any big city during the night, all of those skyscrapers, they are with all the lights on all the time. And the amount of energy that this is consuming is actually higher than in the past. In the UK, for example, the amount of energy consumed per capita has increased about 25,000% since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution up until today. And I would argue that most of it is due to the very effective designs we've done over the past that are changing the behavior of people, but also the amount of products that are being bought. Now, if you go to the second example of the green fiber bottle, yes, those bottles are both renewable, made out of bio-based materials, and they are also biodegradable. They can degrade in nature at the end of life without causing any harm. But what happens is that when people know that those bottles are both renewable and biodegradable, they think, well, it's sustainable already. I don't need to take any responsibility for the bottles anymore. So instead of sending them to recycling, for instance, or to reuse, what we see happening is that people start littering those bottles in nature. And then here, of course, the impact is higher than before, because now we do have all of those materials that are not kept in the loop to ensure that we take the maximum value out of them. And then finally, if you go to the last example, Too Good to Go, that is addressing food waste, I would argue that it is indeed an extremely innovative system, bringing stakeholders together to address an extremely important societal issue. But what happens is that what we see is that food is being wasted at home instead of being wasted at the supermarkets or restaurants. When people get them, they get them at a very large quantity and with a date so close to the expiry date that they end up not even have the time to eating the food. But I would say that probably worse than that is that it also provides no incentives whatsoever to restaurants or supermarkets to minimize the surplus of food at a first instance. Well, in the end of the day, they are still selling that food. And if you were to ask me then whether all of those innovations that are coming from design for sustainability are enough, my answer is a big no. And you could argue that those are only three examples, but we've been looking into the literature of design for sustainability over the past 250 years to try to understand the extent to which our good intentions when we put up those new designs in the world are actually leading to the realized environmental savings that they would. And what we found out is that about 47% of all potential sustainability gains with these innovations are never ever achieved. And this is due to what is called a rebound effect. And I brought a definition here for you. So the rebound effects, they are all of those unintended consequences of design that are driven by either behavioral at an individual level or systemic changes at a social level that in the end of the day will undermine the potential sustainability gains of those innovations at a first instance. So those are behavior changes that are happening due to the integration of those innovations that had an intention in the beginning to improve the world, as any design does, but in that case, by minimizing the overall environmental and sustainability impact. And what is happening is that this design process, the way we understand it today, is clearly not enough to address those unintended consequences that we see emerging when we introduce design. And we are not really that good to go from the design artifact to understanding what are the consequences that this design has in broader social technical systems, and even less so in understanding how those changes can then be feedback into the very early stages of design so that we can reframe the problem or the solution or the concepts we are going for in order to avoid those rebound effects from happening. And I would argue that what we need to make this change is a paradigm shift that would enable us as designers to prevent those potential rebound effects of sustainability oriented interventions from the very early stages of design, when we are still envisioning what our design intervention is going to be. And when we manage to do that and we manage to have this feedback loop, then this would allow us to very clearly understand what are the behavioral mechanisms that are triggered by the design interventions and are changing behavioral at an individual level or at a social level in society, and how this is potentially offsetting the overall potential sustainability gains through modeling and simulation, using technologies and approaches such as system dynamics or agent-based modeling that allow us to understand how a small change in the system might lead to rebound effects over time. But also, more than that, if you look at the systemic level, where are the key leverage points that can allow us to have an intervention to preventing those rebound effects from happening through innovative design strategies or combination of strategies that together will lead to the achievement of the overall potential sustainability benefits with sustainability oriented innovations. And when we do that, then we will not be creating a bigger problem than the one that we have to start with. And this in a very conceptual level, what we are doing in a project called Reboundless. This is funded by the European Research Council here in Europe. It's a 5-year long project that is bringing together specialists from many different areas, all the way from design and engineering to psychologists, neuroscientists, social scientists, and system modelers, so that we can go from the current state of the art, where we have those very anecdotal examples of rebound effects, like the ones I just presented to you today, to going one level deeper in the iceberg model, so that we can explain and clearly understand why, when, and how rebound effects occur, coming from well intended sustainability innovations. On the basis of this understanding of the behavioral mechanisms at both an individual and a social level, we can then go to the next step and use model-based simulation approaches to analyze for very specific cases what are the potential rebound effects emerging, how big or how small they are, but also where are the key leverage points, so that we can go one step forward towards the prevention of those rebound effects. And we have it all together. Our goal is to then come up with what we call the reboundless design theory, that will expand the current state of the art that we have in design science to allow for not only the prevention of the rebound effects, but also the achievement of the potential sustainability gains connected to them. We started the project with a focus on manufacturing companies, designing products or services, but also stakeholders designing entire social technical systems. And a few months ago, we got a new project connected to that, that is bringing this knowledge also to policymaking. And we are working with a number of entities from the European Commission, the European Environmental Agency, to support them to understand also how to use the very same design approaches for the prevention of rebound effects when designing sustainability oriented policies. And our main goal by doing that is to enable the design of social technical systems where we can have an early simulation of higher order effects in design. Here, I don't call them rebound effects specifically because I'm convinced that the knowledge here can be extrapolated to other design areas that are not directly connected to sustainability alone. Every single design that we put out there will have an influence in relation to how people behave, either intentionally or unintentionally. And understanding how it happens, I believe, is key to enhance the way we design. This would probably enable us to get from user oriented design, probably the paradigm that we have today, towards life oriented design, enabling not only the fulfillment of human needs, but also the health of the planet as a whole, so that we can live within the planetary boundaries, using the resources that we have available to fulfill needs of the current and the future generations. And this will ultimately lead to a deeper understanding of what is the behavior of social technical systems that will then result into the reboundless design. And I would argue that without that, we cannot really achieve design if we go back to the definition from Herb Simon, because that's the only way in which we can actually be certain that we are changing existing situations into preferred ones instead of changing existing situations to potentially worse off situations than the ones that we have today. And once we do it, I hope that we'll be able to design in a way where we can live within the planetary boundaries, fulfilling needs both at the social, the environmental, and the economic levels. That was it. Thank you very much for your attention, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Uh, so
Thank
we'll,
you very much. I'll let Sudeep go ahead.
no, I thought we'll open it up for any questions that people may have.
Yeah. If there are no questions, I will start with one. So when you talk to this industry, I know you're getting supported by EU also. When you talk to these industries, how receptive are they to make these transitions? Uh, do they see that they can use these methods to actually uh, not create rebound effects, you know? Oh, sorry, there's something. Not create rebound effect, which means that there won't be growth in the consumption of the product. You're caught in this strange dilemma, isn't it? You want to grow, but at the same time, you don't want to grow, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And I would say that many cases rebound effects are connected to growth, but
Mm-hmm.
many other cases they are not. And I can give
Mm-hmm.
you an example. If we talk about car sharing systems, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
they are an extremely innovative system that allows more people to have access to the same cars, and by doing that, it enables less cars being needed to fulfill the very same mobility needs of a given group of people. From a car sharing provider perspective, they have the interest that those cars will last for as long as possible so that they can make money for as long as possible with as many trips as the cars can provide. But what happens in many cases is that because people don't have ownership of those cars, they end up driving in less careful way, which leads to a significantly lower lifetime of the cars that in the end of the day would require more cars instead of less to fulfill the same mobility needs. That's a very good example of a rebound effect that aligns pretty much with the incentives of companies. And this is an area where companies are really interested in understanding how to drive user behavior in a way to enhance their overall value proposition and value acquisition as well. And I think that this is a good example in which it goes hand in hand and that it makes all sense also from a growth perspective to address rebound effects. Another extreme is we have a new extremely strong trend connected to what we call absolute sustainability that understands that there's a threshold which needs to be met in order to ensure that we are capable of sustaining life on Earth. It's based on the research on the planetary boundaries. They basically look into the 9 Earth systems that define stability of Earth to enable life as we understand it today. And they try to understand for each one of those systems what is the safe operation
So I was telling this whatever project Madam has mentioned seems to be having very vast scope, and information provided was very interesting, but seems it was cut short suddenly, in, as per me. So some questions where this recycling, say sustainability means starting from raw product to the disposal, and then back to the after recycling, coming to the same point and doing the things in a nature friendly ways. So where do your project focus, which aspect where recycling is a prime, I think,
Mm-hmm.
prime objective?
Yeah. Thank you for your question. I would say that here we take any sort of sustainability strategy for design. So it could be all the way from designing for recycling, designing for remanufacturing, design of service-based business model, design of more efficient manufacturing processes, design using recycled materials, for instance, and all of that, they are inputs to what we do. So let's say that you came up to a concept where you want to use 100% recycled materials, and you want your product also to be remanufactured a few times before reaching the recycling stage. What we do here is to say, okay, those are all good intentions, and those are all embedded in your design in one way or the other. But what we do is to say, will this, when implemented in the real world, actually bring the potential benefits that are promised by recycled content and so on and so forth, or not? Plus, what could be potential behavioral changes that this will drive, either at an individual level or a systemic level, that might offset these overall potential sustainability goals? And I'd say this is the addition that these projects bring into. It will help us to see how we could potentially enhance the overall approach that we take for recycling in that specific design project, that might be either at a product level, at a technology level, at a take back system level, for instance, or even at an end of life level, so that you as a designer and as a company can achieve the expected sustainability benefits, with this case recycling as an example. But we are really agnostic to what is the type of sustainability intervention you'll be working on. I think this is already extremely strong in the design for sustainability field, and also circular design strategies. And we take that as a point of departure and not as the main goal.
Okay, one thing comes to my mind is especially for food packaging. So there is a mental block because in the back of the mind, people have, at least I know many people have in mind that this recycled, once they know that it is a packaging is recycled and things like that, it is in the back of the mind they have that a lot of chemicals are being used for recycling.
Mm-hmm.
So once you tell specifically recycled packet, recycled bottles, especially water bottle, juice bottle, like you gave one example of beer. Beer
Mm-hmm.
may not matter because beer itself is a chemical. people think that way. So how your project takes care of this? Because I think this aspect is very and crucial to address, because it
Yeah.
brings acceptability to the product.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So here, what we would do is to say, okay, the starting point is that people know that this bottle is made of 100% recycled materials. What are then the cognitive processes that goes in their minds? What are the social norms around the society that might either hinder adoption of those recycled bottles, or leads to unintended consequences that might lead to a higher than expected impact than before. And with this understanding, then we can see how can we then change the way we are designing or communicating about this design to enhance adoption and minimize those unintended consequences. But that's really at the core, understanding how the given design triggers changes in behavior and how we can address them to achieve the intention with the design to start with.
Yeah, yeah. Because this is why I have asked this question. I am into last 20 years in product design consultancies. So
Mhm,
I feel this is very important to address this issue, to bring the acceptability to the level. It goes maybe 60, 70, 80%, and maybe in the end 100%. But
mhm,
where the where the product like food is concerned, people are very skeptical until they know. Nothing happens. If they don't know anything, nothing happens. But if it is known to them, they are very skeptical. And
mhm,
on top of it, there are some market wars. Social media is there. People are very connected to social media uh, news and narratives and things like that. So
mhm,
there should be some counter argument or counter advertisements, or I will say counter exposures, where it says that see, this is used by this company and it is recycled product, and
mhm,
I don't know some of the things, but I felt that this should be brought out because I am encountering such questions. So
mhm.
thank you very much.
Yeah.
All the best for your research.
Welcome.
Yeah,
Yeah, and thanks for sharing your experience too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One question I had was when you look at companies like especially the printer manufacturer companies which have gone into a product service type of model, the initial intent was driven by protection of their revenue streams, but once you get into a product service, it creates an option where they can also look at sustainability and so on. But does it also stifle the innovation itself? So, is that a counterintuitive effect which is happening in such companies? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's usually we say that the higher the constraints, the higher the creativity and the innovation, so that you can fulfill your needs. And I would say it's the same for sustainability. In many cases, sustainability can be seen as a constraint to innovation, but I would argue actually the opposite. If you have constrained resources, if you have constrained time, this will lead you to think about innovative ways in which you can achieve your goal at the same time as living with the constraints that are out there. And I would say that the innovations in product service system companies, they are not only within the physical product itself, but they're also bringing innovations in the services that they are providing. They are bringing innovations into the infrastructure constellations that they put together, but also into the different stakeholders that they are engaging to deliver that given value proposition. And I think it could go even further if you look not only at a product service system level, but at a social technical system level. For instance, a municipality managing mobility in the city. Here again, they have a number of different levers that they can change to fulfill the need moving from A to B by building upon a number of different innovations, either isolatedly or connected in broader systems. So I would say that um, sustainability, in many cases, in most of the cases, drives innovation. It doesn't really limit it.
Okay, so a related question is so is it useful to take a I would say a broader view of a product at a system level and look at like should product design be revisited from a systems perspective rather than looking at an isolated product or a technology.
Yes, I think so. I think that we need to be conscious about the different levels of design. Products are important levels of analysis, but you can only go that far in relation with product innovation. Um, when you start to expand it towards the system level, then we can start looking, for instance, at product service systems that brings together product services, infrastructure, and actor networks. But you can even go one level up in understanding overall social technical systems. And I do think that design must evolve from the traditional product oriented focus towards a more system oriented focus if we are to have solutions that actually work as solutions and not as a bigger problem makers.
Thank you.
So I have a question. I have a comment and a question. The comment is that when they started this bottom of the pyramid business from the business schools, they did something. They started selling small amounts of soap and shampoo in these plastic sachets, especially in India, for 10 cents, something like that. What that created was these were plastic packages, and this has created a huge amount of litter all over the place in India. This is a very good example of rebound effect. More people are using it, it's cheaper for them for one use, but the consequences of that is a disturbed environment, right? So in one sense, the question I wanted to ask was, when you did the beer bottle and other projects like that, how much do you get into looking at materials and material structures, or work with people who can create new material structures or use the same kind of things like paper in a different way? Uh, there are people who are using things like corn to make cups or banana structures. So just from that point of view, what do you see?
Yeah, I think that the green fiber bottle is a very good example of exactly that. We wanted to understand how to minimize the impact with metal in terms of cans
Mm-hmm.
or glass in terms of bottles, to
Mm-hmm.
try to really understand how we could use materials that would have a lower environmental impact in themselves, in this case being bio-based materials, but at the same time have a lower impact at the end of life, having this overall life cycle perspective and acknowledging that the impact of a material is not only connected to the use phase, but it goes all the way from material extraction, the manufacturing, the use, and the end of life. And something that was really interesting in this project, that we were also doing life cycle assessments at the side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the most impactful phases was the manufacturing phase, because to be able to produce the paper bottles, we would need to transport paper pulp in a liquid form almost. So in
Mm-hmm.
those big trucks. And the impact with transportation was extremely high
Mm-hmm.
because it was really heavy due to the water. And this led to the realization that it will only be better for the environment if the factories for the production of the bottles would be closely located to the factories of the paper pulp.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it was actually a worse idea, and we should never do it to start with. And this is looking at the manufacturing phase, but then you can go all the way to the end of life phase and question, for instance, here in Denmark, they have an extremely effective take back system for beverage packaging on the basis of deposit. About 98% of every beverage packaging gets returned and recycled, which is extremely high. Whether in places like Brazil, where I come from, it's the system is not there at all, and most of the packaging goes to either recycling due to informal work or just landfilling. And in
Okay.
that case, yeah, and in that case, the biodegradable bottles might make sense in terms of the landfilling, but if the value with the recycling of the bottles would be significantly lower than the value of recycling aluminum cans, for instance, in Brazil, the waste pickers would not really have the incentives to collect them to start with. So that was another consideration to be taken into account to understand in which context and in which situation that specific bottle would make sense. Probably not in Denmark, probably more so in Brazil or in countries that don't have the infrastructure. And this also leads to kind of this contextualization of design. Over time, we've come to mass production, where one design is sold all over the world with the very same features and characteristics without considering contextual factors that significantly influence their overall performance and capacity of fulfilling needs, either at a social level or at a sustainability level, too.
Thank you. I think that was very important point, contextualization of design. And also, I think other thing I wanted to ask you quickly is that when you do these things, have you also looked at local practices? Let us say, I'm sure in Brazil, there are local practices, especially among the poor, to recycle a lot of things in some fashion. You know what I mean? Or in rural areas, they have their own way of choosing material that is recyclable. Uh,
Mhm.
have you been able to connect to some of those kind of exemplars to look at materials that could be used in a broader sense where this kind of resource is available?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I haven't done it in my research
Mhm.
specifically, but I know of a number of circular economy oriented papers that
Mhm.
do very country specific analysis to understand not only what are the key circular economy strategies that are implemented in the different countries, but also what are success factors and drivers for why they are implemented in the way that they are implemented. And I truly think that there are loads that we can learn from it on
Mhm.
how to keep value in the loop, but
Mhm.
also recover value from countries like Brazil, where again,
Mhm.
money and resources are a constraint, which
Mhm.
makes people to implement more innovative practices, probably not at a design level, but on a personal level, to
Mhm.
be able to fulfill their needs with a lower consumption, and in this case, also expenses.
Well, thank you very much for doing this. I think it's very important. Sorry for the interruption. When we put the video together, we'll slice them together in some ways. Uh, and I was going to ask you, you can, yeah, we can close the lecture, Sudhir.